You sweep like a snail. Faster. I work all day and you can't even clean the yard. What good are you?
She was only 10 years old when her parents died, orphaned and abandoned to the cruelest woman in the village. She spent 10 years as an unpaid servant, beaten, starved, and broken. And just when she thought life couldn't get any worse, her own aunt sold her. To a man so wicked, even the devil would fear him. This is Zainab's story. This story will break your heart. It will make you angry. It will make you cry. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Our story begins in a beautiful village of Ajara, a place where neighbors knew each other's names, where children played freely in the streets, and where community meant everything. This is where Zainab was born. Her parents weren't rich. They owned a small fabric shop in the market. Nothing fancy, just honest work. But they had something more valuable than money. They had love. For 7 years, they had prayed for a child. 7 long years of hoping, praying, visiting healers. And then, on a warm evening in the dry season, their prayers were answered. They named her Zainab. She grew up surrounded by love. Her parents taught her everything: how to count money, how to greet elders with respect, how to treat everyone with kindness. Every night, after the shop closed, after dinner was eaten, the three of them would sit together. Her father would tell her interesting stories about Tortoise and his cunning ways. Her mother would braid her hair, and Zainab would tell them about her day. They were happy, truly, deeply happy. The kind of happiness that makes you believe the world is good, that life is fair. But sometimes, the world isn't fair. It started with the rains, the heavy rains that came that year and wouldn't stop. With the floods came mosquitoes, and with the mosquitoes came death. They called it different things. Some said malaria, others said yellow fever. The old people called it the sickness that takes the strong and leaves the weak. Within 3 weeks, 17 people died, including Zainab's parents. They were buried side by side as they had lived together. The entire village came. They wept openly, but none cried harder than a 7-year-old girl who had just lost everything. After the funeral, the villagers gathered, talking in hushed tones. "The poor child," they said. "What will become of her? Does she have any family? Grandparents?" Both sets had passed years ago. There was only one living relative, her father's sister, Raliat. The villagers exchanged uncomfortable looks. "Raliat," they whispered, "that woman has a heart of stone." But the village elder shook his head sadly. "It doesn't matter," he said. "She's blood. She must take the child." And this is where Auntie Raliat entered Zainab's life. In most stories, this is where the loving aunt would step in, wrap her arms around the orphan child, and promise to care for her like her own. But Auntie Raliat was not most aunts. When the village elder approached her about taking Zainab, she put on a good show. She dabbed her eyes with a cloth, spoke loudly enough for others to hear about how she couldn't believe her dear brother was gone, how of course she would take the child. 3 days after the funeral, Auntie Raliat came to collect Zainab. The little girl packed her few belongings into a small bag: some clothes, her mother's headscarf, her precious rag doll. She walked through her home one last time, looking at every corner, every room that echoed with her parents' laughter. Every memory was there: her mother cooking in that kitchen, her father reading in that corner, the three of them eating dinner together at that table. She touched the door frame tenderly, whispered goodbye to her mama and papa, and turned away. As they drove away, Zainab pressed her face against the window, watching her childhood disappear. The house getting smaller, the village fading, the market where her parents' shop was, all disappearing in the distance. Her hand was pressed against the window, tears silently falling. And Auntie Raliat, watching her in the rearview mirror, told her coldly to stop crying. "Your parents are gone," she said harshly. "I'm your family now. You should be grateful I'm taking you in. Do you know how much it costs to raise a child?" The little girl tried to stop crying, wiped her tears, but they kept coming. Auntie Raliat's voice grew harder. "I said stop. I can't stand whining. You'll learn that quickly in my house." Zainab bit her lip, forcing herself to be silent, holding in the sobs. That 2-hour drive was Zainab's last taste of freedom. She just didn't know it yet. Auntie Raliat's compound was in a different town, 2 hours from everything Zainab knew. Far enough that no one from her old life would visit, isolated enough that no one would hear her cries. The moment they arrived and those gates closed behind them, everything changed. Auntie Raliat's voice became completely different, cold, authoritative. Cruel. She told Zainab to get out and bring her bag. Then she grabbed the child's face roughly, forcing eye contact, and laid down the rules. Listen carefully, she said, because I'm only saying this once. Your parents are dead. They left you with nothing. No money, no property, no inheritance, nothing. Everything you eat, everything you wear, every breath you take under this roof comes from my pocket. So you will work. You will earn your keep. You will do exactly as you're told. When you're told, without question. You will speak only when spoken to. And you will be grateful for every crumb I give you. When little Zainab asked where she would sleep, Auntie Raliat stopped at a different door, smaller, leading to the back of the house. She opened it to reveal a storage room. Cramped, dark, smelling of old boxes and dust. Rat droppings in the corner, one small dirty window, a thin mat on the floor, one threadbare blanket, no pillow. This is where servants sleep, Auntie Raliat said coldly. Be grateful you have a roof at all. That first night, in a room that smelled of death and decay, Zainab sat on the thin mat and looked at her new reality. She opened her bag with trembling hands, took out her mother's headscarf, held it to her face, and cried herself to sleep. She curled up on the mat, hugging her rag doll and her mother's scarf, crying silently until exhaustion finally took her. Let me tell you what Zainab's life became. Every single day, for 10 years. 4 a.m., wake up. No alarm clock needed. The beatings had trained her body to wake before dawn. 4:30 a.m., sweep the entire compound. Every corner, every room. If Auntie Raliat found one speck of dust, one cobweb, one leaf, she would appear with her cane. You call this clean? She would demand. Are you blind or just stupid? And the cane would strike across Zainab's back before the girl could even apologize or promise to clean it again. 5:30 a.m. Fetch water from the well. 6 trips. Heavy buckets balanced on her head. While other girls her age were still sleeping, dreaming of school and boys and futures. Zainab was already exhausted, struggling with buckets that seemed to grow heavier each year. She would stumble sometimes, spill water, and the punishment for wasting water was severe. 6:30 a.m. Prepare breakfast for the family. Cook, set the table, serve everyone, and watch them eat, because Zainab wasn't allowed to eat with the family. She got leftovers. If there were any, often there weren't. As soon as they leave the house, Zainab would go to the kitchen and look at the nearly empty pots. She would scrape whatever bits of food remained, a small piece of bread, some rice stuck to the bottom of the pot, and eat quickly, hungrily, always hungry. Over the years, this pattern repeated endlessly. As Zainab got older, the work increased and the abuse intensified. Auntie Raliat's children learned they could torment her without consequence. Aisha, now 18, would deliberately spill entire jugs of water on her bedroom floor just after Zainab had cleaned, then summon her to clean it again. When Zainab, exhausted, asked if Aisha could be more careful, the girl would call for her mother. Auntie Raliat would appear with a belt, demanding to know if it was true that Zainab was talking back, being disrespectful. The aunt wouldn't even wait for an answer. She would strike with the belt repeatedly, telling Zainab she was nothing, a burden, a drain on the family, that she should be grateful for the floor she slept on. The physical scars would heal, bruises faded, cuts closed, but the words cut deeper than any cane ever could. Every single day, Auntie Raliat and her children reminded Zainab that she was worthless, unwanted, less than human. Zainab learned not to cry in front of them. Tears made it worse, made them laugh, made the torment last longer. While other children went to school, learned to read, made friends, played games, fell in love, dreamed of futures, Zainab worked. She watched through the compound gates at age 10 as other children walked to school in uniforms, and when she asked Auntie Raliat if she would go to school someday, the woman laughed cruelly. School? For a house girl? What a waste of money. You don't need education to scrub toilets. Cynthia joined in the mockery, asking if the orphan could even read anymore, if she even remembered her ABCs. Zainab looked down, ashamed, because the truth was she had forgotten most of it. She had only completed primary 2 before her parents died. She could barely read, could write her name and little else. All the knowledge her parents had tried to give her slowly faded, buried under years of labor and abuse. She grew up in isolation, no friends, no school, No childhood, no hope, just work, pain, and survival. By the time Zainab turned 18, something had changed. Despite everything, the malnutrition, the abuse, the exhaustion, the suffering, she had transformed into a beautiful young woman. She had her mother's high cheekbones, her father's deep, soulful eyes, natural beauty that suffering couldn't completely hide. When she walked through the market, people would stop and turn to look. Market women would whisper to each other, asking if that was Raliat's house girl, commenting that she was stunning, saying what a waste it was that the wicked woman treated her like dirt. Young men in the market would notice her, trying to catch her eye. But Zainab didn't see it. After 10 years of being told she was worthless, ugly, nothing, she couldn't see what others saw. She walked with her eyes down, unaware of her own beauty, focused only on her tasks, no confidence, no sense of self-worth. But Auntie Raliat noticed. Oh, she noticed, because where others saw beauty, she saw opportunity. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, counting money in her ledger, muttering to herself. 17 years old, she said. Beautiful despite everything. Virgin, obviously. Some man will pay good money for her. Finally, this burden will become profitable. Over the next few weeks, Auntie Raliat's treatment of Zainab changed slightly, strategically. She told Zainab to start bathing with better soap, to oil her skin because she looked ashy. Zainab was surprised, suspicious, but complied. A few days later, Auntie Raliat examined her and announced that she was 17 now, a woman, time to start thinking about marriage. Zainab was shocked, saying she wasn't ready. She didn't know anyone. She'd never even, but the aunt cut her off harshly. You think you have a choice? You think anyone will marry you for love? You're an orphan with no education, no skills, nothing. I've fed and clothed you for 10 years. 10 years! Time for you to be someone else's burden. I'll find you a husband, someone who can afford you. And finally, I'll be free of you. Zainab should have been suspicious, should have wondered why this woman who'd never shown her kindness suddenly cared about her future. But after 10 years of abuse, she had learned not to question, not to hope, not to expect anything but more pain. That night, alone in her storage room, she looked at her reflection and whispered to herself, married, to someone she didn't know, escaping one prison into another. Maybe he'll be kind, she thought. Maybe he'll be different. Then she laughed bitterly. Or maybe I'm just trading one hell for another. 3 weeks later, on a hot afternoon in the dry season, everything changed. Zainab was cleaning inside when she heard the sound of an expensive car pulling up to the compound gates. She peeked out the window and saw a black Mercedes, shiny and new. The driver opened the back door and a man emerged. He was aged about 53, well-dressed in traditional agbada, wearing an expensive watch and gold rings, a red cap on his head. He carried himself with arrogance, like someone used to getting what he wanted. This was Al-Haji Musa. Auntie Raliat practically ran out to greet him, bowing, acting obsequious, welcoming him like royalty. As they shook hands, he slipped her an envelope, and she quickly pocketed it. Zainab, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt a chill run down her spine. Zainab hurried in with a tray of drinks and snacks. As she served them, she felt his eyes on her, studying her like someone examining merchandise. His gaze traveled up and down her body, calculating, possessive. Her skin crawled under his stare, but she kept her eyes down as she'd been trained to do. She placed the tray and turned to leave, but he told her to wait. His voice was smooth, practiced. He ordered her to look at him. Slowly, she raised her eyes and met his gaze. His eyes were cold, predatory, despite the smile on his face. He nodded approvingly and said just 2 words. She'll do. Auntie Raliat quickly dismissed Zainab back to the kitchen, saying adults were talking. But Zainab lingered near the door, listening, her heart pounding. Through the doorway, Zainab heard fragments of their conversation. The man asked how much Auntie Raliat had said. 50,000 for her troubles raising Zainab, the aunt replied, plus proper dowry, of course, to make it look legitimate. The man, Al-Haji Musa, scoffed that 50,000 was steep for an orphan house girl, but Auntie Raliat insisted, telling him that Zainab was a virgin, pure, untouched, obedient, and beautiful, worth every cent. There was a pause, then Al-Haji agreed, 50,000, but he wanted the wedding done quickly. 2 weeks, no drama. Auntie Raliat tried to protest that 2 weeks wasn't enough time for preparations, but he cut her off harshly. 2 weeks, he said, or I find another girl. The aunt quickly agreed. 2 weeks was fine. The sound of them shaking hands echoed through the house. In that moment, listening to her own life being negotiated like a business deal, Zainab understood everything. This wasn't about finding her a husband. This wasn't about her future or her happiness. This was a sale. Auntie Raliat was selling her, like cattle, like property. 50,000, about $100. Her aunt was selling her brother's daughter, her own flesh and blood, for the price of a used television. Zainab slid down the kitchen wall, sitting on the floor in shock, trying to process what was happening. After Al-Haji left, Auntie Raliat closed the door and opened the envelope, counting the money greedily. When she turned and saw Zainab in the kitchen doorway, she asked if she had heard. Zainab nodded mutely. Good, the aunt said coldly. That saves me the trouble of explaining. You're getting married, in 2 weeks, to Al-Haji Musa. He's a magician, performs at parties, makes good money. You should be grateful. A man like that, willing to take a nothing like you. Zainab's voice broke as she begged. Please, Auntie, she said. I don't know him. He's older than my father would have been. Please don't make me do this. But Auntie Raliat interrupted her harshly. Make you? Make you? After everything I've done for you? This is happening, and you'll smile and be grateful. Or so help me. I will make your last 2 weeks here a living hell. Do you understand me? She grabbed Zainab's arm painfully, squeezing until the girl nodded through her tears. Good, Auntie Raliat said. Now get back to work. The bathroom needs cleaning. Then she released Zainab and walked away. Zainab sat alone on that kitchen floor, crying silently, holding the old scarf that still carried the faintest memory of her mother. She whispered to her parents in heaven, Mama, Papa, I'm so sorry. I tried to be strong like you told me. I tried, but I can't. I can't do this. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks before her life would change forever, before she'd be handed over to a stranger, before she'd discover that there are worse things in this world than being Auntie Raliat's slave. The wedding happened exactly 2 weeks later. It wasn't a celebration. It was a transaction. Zainab sat in a simple wedding dress, with no makeup, her eyes red from crying, her face numb with shock. There was no family from her side except Auntie Raliat and her children, all dressed up nicely, putting on a show for the few paid guests. Al-Haji Musa stood there in his expensive agbada, looking satisfied, like a man who'd just made a good business deal. After the ceremony, Zainab watched from a distance as Auntie Raliat received her payment, counting the money with greedy fingers. She was witnessing her own sale, seeing her exact price. When it was time to say goodbye, there was no emotional farewell. Auntie Raliat simply told her formally, for the sake of appearances, to be a good wife and obey her husband. There was no hug, no tears, no warmth, just cold dismissal. The aunt's children didn't even bother to say goodbye. They were already leaving, ready to celebrate being free of the burden. Zainab got into Al-Haji's car with one small bag containing her few belongings. As the car pulled away, she looked back one last time. Auntie Raliat was already walking away, not even watching her leave. 10 years. 10 years Zainab had lived with that woman, worked for her, suffered under her roof, and not even a hug goodbye, because to Auntie Raliat, Zainab was never family. She was inventory, and now she'd been sold. The car drove through town and into the outskirts, toward an isolated area. When Al-Haji Musa's compound came into view, Zainab felt her stomach drop. It was large and expensive looking, but there was something wrong about it, something unwelcoming. The walls were high, topped with broken glass. The windows were barred. The gates were solid metal. When the gates opened and the car entered, they closed behind with an ominous clang that made Zainab flinch. Al-Haji turned to her and smiled, welcoming her to her new home. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Inside, he led her through the house, showing her the rooms. Living room, kitchen. You'll be doing all the cooking, of course, he said. His bedroom. Our bedroom now, he corrected himself. Then he led her to the back area where there were multiple locked doors. These rooms are private, he told her. My workrooms. You must never enter these. Understood? Zainab nodded quickly, saying, yes, husband. He studied her for a moment with those cold eyes. Good, he said. I value obedience, Zainab. Obey me. and we'll have no problems. Disobey me, and he let the threat hang in the air. That first day, Alhaji Musa was almost pleasant, polite even. But Zainab could feel it beneath the surface. The undercurrent of control, of ownership, of something dark waiting to emerge. That evening, Zainab was unpacking her small bag, trying to find places for her mother's scarf, her precious ragdoll. Alhaji appeared in the doorway, watching her. When he saw the ragdoll, he asked what it was, mocking her for being too old for toys. He walked over and took it from her hands. Zainab panicked, explaining desperately that it was her mother's, the last thing she had. He examined it dismissively, saying her mother was dead, that she was a woman now, his wife, that she didn't need children's things. He moved to throw it away. Without thinking, driven by desperation, Zainab grabbed his arm, begging him not to, saying it was all she had of her parents. The slap came fast and hard, striking her across the face. It was the first time he'd hit her. Zainab staggered back, shocked, holding her stinging cheek. His voice turned ice cold. "Never," he said slowly. "Touch me without permission." He threw the rag doll back at her. "Keep your toy," he said, "but understand this. Zainab, you're my wife now. That means I own you. Your body, your time, your obedience. Everything. Is that clear?" Through her tears clutching the rag doll to her chest, Zainab whispered, "Yes, husband." "Good," he said. "Now clean yourself up. Cook dinner. I eat at 8 p.m. sharp." Then he left, and just like that, Zainab understood. She'd traded one prison for another, one cruel master for another. But this one was worse. Over the following weeks, Alhaji Musa dropped all pretense. The polite pretense vanished completely. In the kitchen, he would inspect her cooking and find fault with everything. "The rice is overcooked," he'd say. "Do it again." When she'd protest that there was no more rice, he would sweep the plate off the table, food splattering everywhere. "Then you don't eat tonight," he'd say coldly. "Maybe hunger will teach you to cook properly." He locked her in. Every time he left the compound, he would lock the gates from outside. When Zainab tried to go out to the market one day, he blocked her path, asking if he'd given her permission to leave. She explained they needed vegetables, but he cut her off. "I will go to market," he said. "You stay here. My wives don't wander around like loose women." She heard the lock click after he left, trapping her inside those walls. 1 month into the marriage, Alhaji left for a 3-day performance tour in another state. As usual, he locked the gates, but in his rush to leave, he forgot to lock one of his private rooms. That afternoon, as Zainab was cleaning the hallway, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She stood there looking at it, fear and curiosity fighting inside her. She knew she shouldn't. He'd said never to enter, but something compelled her forward. She pushed the door open slowly and gasped at what she saw inside. It wasn't an office. It wasn't storage. It was a shrine, a ritual room. The walls were covered in strange symbols she didn't recognize. Ritual items were arranged carefully on shelves. Cowrie shells, bottles with liquids she couldn't identify, dried herbs, animal bones, candles burned down to stubs. Mirrors were arranged in odd geometric patterns. Zainab entered slowly, her heart pounding, looking around in horror and fascination. Then she saw them, photographs pinned to the wall. Different women, all young, all beautiful. She counted 4 photographs. Beneath each photo was a name written in marker. She touched the photos with trembling fingers, whispering the names. Who are they? Then she noticed beneath the photos there were newspaper clippings pinned to the wall. She leaned closer to read them. Missing. Young woman vanishes after wedding. Family seeks information on disappeared bride. Police investigating missing wife of local performer. Her blood ran cold as she read the details. Zainab backed away slowly, her hand covering her mouth to hold back a scream. 4 wives, 4 missing women, all married to the same man, all vanished without a trace, and now she was the 5th. In the corner of the room, she saw a chest with a lock. Her fear was overwhelming her reason now. She knew she should leave, should get out of this room immediately, but she had to know. She had to understand what she was dealing with. She found something heavy, a ritual bell, and broke the lock. The chest opened. Inside were belongings, women's clothes in different sizes and styles, jewelry, identification cards, personal items, all from different women. The evidence was undeniable. 4 women before her, 4 wives who vanished, and their belongings were here, hidden away like trophies or evidence of crimes. At the bottom of the chest, beneath all the belongings, Zainab found a notebook, a journal. She opened it with shaking hands and saw different handwriting on different pages. The first entry was written in hurried, panicked script. "My name is Amina," it read. "If anyone finds this, please know, he is not what he seems. The magic is real. He is doing something to us, trapping us, taking something from us. Please help us. Please." And the entry ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted or had suddenly become too weak to continue. The second entry was in different handwriting, shakier. "Blessing here. I tried to escape. He caught me. He said he would curse my family if I tried again. He said he has powers I can't understand. I'm so scared. I hear voices at night, women crying. The mirrors. There's something wrong with the mirrors. I see things in them. Faces. I think it's the other wives. I think we're all still here. Trapped somehow." Zainab's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the journal. Zainab dropped the journal like it had burned her. She looked up at the mirrors in the room, her breath coming in short gasps. For just a moment, for just a split second, she swore she saw them. Faces in the mirrors. Women looking back at her. Mouths open in silent screams. Hands pressed against the glass from the inside, reaching out, begging. She screamed and ran from the room, slamming the door behind her, running to the main living area, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. She stood in the living room, panting, terrified, trying to convince herself it wasn't real. "It can't be real," she told herself out loud. "Magic isn't real. He's just a con man, a performer, a criminal who murders his wives." But those entries, those women believed it. They felt something happening to them. And Zainab suddenly realized, hadn't she been feeling weaker? Whether the magic was real or just the power of belief and fear, whether Al-Haji was a dark sorcerer or just a clever murderer, the result was the same. 4 women had vanished. 4 wives had disappeared without a trace, and Zainab was the 5th. She was next in line. She started pacing, panic taking over completely. "I have to escape," she said to the empty room. "I have to get out before he comes back." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. She ran to the gate, locked solid with a heavy padlock. She tried the windows, all barred with iron. She looked at the walls, too high, topped with broken glass that would shred her hands and feet. She was trapped, completely, utterly trapped. 3 days later, Al-Haji Musa returned from his performance tour. He called out to her as he entered, "Wife, where are you? Come help with my bags." She came quickly, taking his bags, welcoming him home with a voice that trembled despite her best efforts. He studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "You look pale," he said. "Are you sick?" She shook her head quickly. "No, husband. Just tired." He stepped closer, uncomfortably close, and touched her face. His fingers were cold. "You feel weak," he observed. "That's good. Very good. The process is working faster with you than the others." She went rigid, terror flooding through her. What process?" she asked without thinking. He smiled that cold smile. "Never mind. Just know that you're serving a greater purpose, Zainab. Your sacrifice will make me more powerful than I've ever been." He walked past her into the house, leaving her standing there frozen, his words echoing in her mind. Your sacrifice. The process. Working faster than the others. It was real. Whatever he was doing, magic or murder or something in between, it was real and it was happening to her. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. Much worse. Zainab could feel it now that she was aware. This draining sensation, this constant exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. She would wake up more tired than when she went to bed. Her reflection in the mirror looked thinner, paler, like she was fading. And the mirrors, she started avoiding them. Because sometimes when she passed by them quickly, she swore she saw other faces looking back. The 4 wives, trapped, waiting, watching. Al-Haji noticed her weakness and seemed pleased by it. He would comment on it, telling her she was almost ready. Almost ready for what, he never explained. But the way he looked at her, like a farmer watching a crop ripen for harvest, made her blood run cold. One night, after a particularly brutal day where she'd collapsed while carrying water, Zainab made a decision. She couldn't escape physically. The compound was locked tight, but she could escape another way. After Al-Haji went to sleep, she went to the kitchen and found rat poison stored under the sink. She held the bottle in her hands, looking at it, tears streaming down her face. This was it, the only way out. Better to die on her own terms than to become whatever those other women had become. Better to join her parents in the afterlife than to have her soul trapped in a mirror forever. She opened the bottle, raised it to her lips. But just as the poison was about to touch her tongue, something stopped her. A sound from outside the compound. A small sound, a pebble hitting the wall, then another, then a voice, barely audible, whispering from beyond the wall. Zainab, Zainab, if you can hear me, you are not alone. Zainab froze. She lowered the poison bottle slowly, her heart pounding. Was she imagining it? Was this another trick of the mirrors? Of the magic? Of her deteriorating mind? The voice came again, urgent but quiet. Zainab, I know you're in there. I've been watching. I've seen what he does. I'm going to get you out. But you have to hold on. You have to stay alive. Please, just hold on a little longer. For the first time in weeks, in months, in years maybe, Zainab felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Someone knew she was here. Someone was watching. Someone cared. She stumbled to the window closest to the voice, looking out through the bars into the darkness. Who are you? She whispered. Why are you helping me? The voice responded from the shadows. My name is Malik, and I'm helping you because it's right. Because no one deserves what he's doing to you. Because 4 women before you died, and I didn't know in time to save them. But I know about you, and I won't let you be the 5th. Zainab, listen to me carefully. Don't drink that poison. Don't give up. I'm working on a plan. 3 more days. Can you survive 3 more days? Zainab looked at the poison in her hand, then back out toward where the voice was coming from. 3 days, she whispered. I don't know if I have 3 days. He's doing something to me. I can feel myself dying. The voice responded firmly but gently. Then fight. Fight with everything you have. Zainab stood there in the darkness, poison in one hand, the possibility of rescue in the other. She thought of her parents, thought of the 7-year-old girl who'd survived Auntie Raliat's cruelty, thought of the 4 women in the mirrors who'd given up hope. She made her choice. Slowly, she poured the poison down the sink, watching it drain away. Then she whispered toward the window, her voice barely audible but filled with determination. 3 days. I'll fight for 3 days. I'll be ready. Zainab sank to the floor, not in despair this time, but in exhausted relief. Someone knew, someone cared, someone was coming. She wasn't alone anymore. For 3 days, she would have to pretend everything was normal. Serve Al-Haji, act weak, hide her hope. But inside, something had changed. The pilot light of her spirit, nearly extinguished, suddenly burned a little brighter. She had a reason to fight now. She had a deadline. 3 days. She just had to survive 3 more days. Those 3 days were the longest of Zainab's life. Every moment felt like an eternity. She forced herself to eat, even though food made her nauseous, because she needed strength. She slept when she could, though nightmares haunted her. She served Al-Haji as usual, acting even weaker than she felt, letting him believe his dark process was working perfectly. And every night she would go to the back window and find small signs that Malik was still there, still watching, still planning. A small cloth tied to a tree branch outside, a pattern of stones near the wall. Messages that said, I'm here, you're not alone, hold on. On the 3rd day, Al-Haji announced he had a performance that evening at a wealthy businessman's party. It would run late, he said. He wouldn't be back until after midnight. Don't wait up. Just have food ready for when I return. Zainab nodded submissively, saying yes. But inside, her heart was racing. This was it. This was the night. Al-Haji left at sunset, locking the gates as always. She watched through the window as his car disappeared down the road. Then she began to prepare. She changed into the darkest clothes she had. She tied her mother's scarf around her waist. The hours crept by. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. At 11:30, Zainab went to the back window and waited, her whole body shaking with fear and anticipation. At exactly midnight, she heard it, a soft whistle from beyond the wall. Then Malik's voice, quiet but urgent. Zainab, I'm here. The rope is coming over now. When you see it, climb. I'll pull from this side to help. But you have to be quick. If anyone sees us, if anyone raises an alarm, we're both dead. Do you understand? Zainab whispered back that she understood. A rope appeared over the top of the wall, falling down to her side. She grabbed it with trembling hands. It was rough, thick, sturdy. She looked up at the 10-foot wall topped with broken glass and felt fear paralyze her. I can't do this, she thought. I'm too weak. I'll fall. I'll fail. Malik's voice came again, sensing her hesitation. Zainab, listen to me. I know you're scared. I know you're weak. But you are also the strongest person I've ever known. You survived 10 years of abuse. You survived anti-Raliat. You survived a month with a monster. You've been beaten, starved, sold, imprisoned. And you're still here, still fighting, still alive. Your parents are watching from heaven, Zainab. What would they want you to do? Would they want you to give up now, when freedom is 10 feet away? Or would they want you to climb? Zainab grabbed the rope with both hands, placed her foot against the wall, and began to climb. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Her arms screamed in pain. Her hands burned from the rough rope. Her legs trembled with every step up the wall. Halfway up, she slipped, falling back a foot, barely catching herself. She hung there, gasping, tears streaming down her face. I can't, she sobbed. Malik's voice came urgently. Yes, you can. Don't look down. Look up. Look at freedom. You're almost there. 3 more pulls, 2 more, 1 more. Come on, Zainab, climb. Zainab found strength she didn't know she had. Strength born of desperation, of hope, of 17 years of survival. She pulled and pulled and pulled. Her head reached the top of the wall. She saw the broken glass, carefully wrapped in cloth where the rope was. She saw on the other side a young man about 25 pulling the rope, his face straining with effort, his eyes locked on hers. Malik, her rescuer. Their eyes met for the first time, and in that moment, Zainab saw something she hadn't seen in 10 years. She saw someone who cared, someone who saw her as a human being, not property, not a servant, not a burden, just a person worth saving. Malik reached over the wall, grabbed her arms and pulled her up and over. For one terrifying moment, Zainab was suspended at the top of the wall, broken glass on either side of her, balanced between captivity and freedom. Then Malik pulled hard, and she tumbled over to his side, into his arms, into freedom. They both fell to the ground from the momentum. For a moment, they just lay there, breathing hard. Then Zainab realized. She was outside the wall. Outside, free. She started sobbing, her whole body shaking with relief and disbelief. Malik helped her to her feet quickly. We have to go. Now. He has friends everywhere. If anyone sees us, they'll tell him. Can you run? Zainab nodded, wiping her tears. She could barely stand, let alone run, but she would crawl if she had to. Malik put his arm around her waist, supporting her weight, and they began to move. Through back alleys, through empty market stalls, through the dark, quiet streets of sleeping neighborhoods. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every sound made them jump. Dogs barked as they passed. A late-night security guard called out, asking who was there, but they hid behind a building until he moved on. They moved as quickly as Zainab's weak body would allow, Malik practically carrying her at times, whispering encouragement. Just a little further. You're doing great. We're almost there. Almost safe. Finally, they reached a corner where a van was parked, engine running, lights off. A man sat in the driver's seat, Ibrahim, Malik's friend, who'd agreed to help despite the danger. Malik opened the back door and helped Zainab inside. She collapsed onto the seat, exhausted beyond measure. Malik climbed in beside her. Go, he told Ibrahim. Drive. Don't stop for anything. The van pulled away from the curb slowly, carefully, headlights still off, trying not to draw attention. They drove through the dark streets, every second feeling like an eternity, expecting to hear Al-Haji's car behind them, expecting to be caught, to be dragged back. But the street behind them stayed empty, dark, quiet. Drive faster, we need to get out of this town, Malik said to Ibrahim. Now. The van sped up, moving as fast as safely possible through the dark streets. They reached the town's edge just as they saw headlights behind them in the distance. A car, driving fast, coming from the direction of Al-Haji's compound. Was it him? Was it one of his people? They didn't wait to find out. Ibrahim pressed the accelerator and the van shot forward onto the highway, leaving the town behind. They drove for 20 minutes in tense silence, constantly checking behind them, expecting pursuit. Then on a straight stretch of highway, They saw headlights approaching from the opposite direction, a car coming toward them, heading back into town. As it got closer, Malik recognized it. Al-Haji's black Mercedes. He was returning early from his performance. Maybe he'd sensed something was wrong. Maybe someone had called him. Whatever the reason, he was on his way back. The two vehicles, the van carrying Zainab to freedom and the Mercedes carrying her captor back to his empty compound, approached each other on that dark highway. They drove for another hour before anyone spoke. Finally, when they were far enough away that pursuit seemed unlikely, Malik exhaled a breath he'd been holding and turned to check on Zainab. She was still curled up on the seat, shaking, crying silently into her hands. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly. Malik took Zainab to a women's shelter 3 hours away from Al-Haji's town. It was run by a woman named Hadiza. The shelter was in a secure location, with guards, cameras, and strict confidentiality. No one could find the women who stayed there unless the women wanted to be found. When they arrived in the early morning hours, Hadiza was waiting, having been called by Malik hours before. She took one look at Zainab, skeletal, traumatized, barely able to stand, and her experienced eyes saw everything immediately. This girl had been through hell and back. Hadiza helped Zainab inside, speaking softly, reassuringly. Zainab was given a room, small but clean, with a real bed, soft pillows, warm blankets, a lock on the inside of the door that she controlled. For the first week, she barely spoke. The trauma was too fresh. The fear that Al-Haji would somehow find her was too strong. She would wake up screaming from nightmares, convinced she was back in that compound. Hadiza and the shelter staff were patient. They'd seen this before. Trauma doesn't heal overnight. It takes time, safety, support, and slowly, with counseling, medical care, proper food, and the support of other survivors in the shelter who understood her pain, Zainab began to heal. But Zainab wasn't content to just escape and hide. After 2 weeks in the shelter, when she'd regained some strength, she told Hadiza she wanted to fight back. She wanted justice. Hadiza explained that fighting back meant going to the police, filing charges, facing Al-Haji in court, reliving all the trauma. It would be hard. "Are you sure?" she asked. Zainab nodded with determination burning in her eyes. "I'm sure. He can't be allowed to do this to anyone else. There can't be a sixth wife. This ends now." With Hadiza's and Malik's support, Zainab went to the police. She filed charges against Al-Haji Musa: forced marriage, unlawful imprisonment, domestic violence, suspected involvement in the disappearance of 4 women. And she filed charges against Auntie Raliat too: child abuse, child labor, human trafficking, selling a minor. The police were initially skeptical. This was a serious accusation against a well-known performer, a man with connections. But then Malik presented the evidence he'd been gathering for months. Photographs of the locked compound, testimonies from neighbors who'd noticed strange things, medical records showing Zainab's malnutrition and injuries. And most damning, he'd managed to retrieve the journal from Al-Haji's ritual room during the rescue. The journal with entries from 4 missing women. The case exploded. When word got out that 4 previous wives had disappeared and a 5th had escaped, the media descended like vultures. The attention brought other victims forward. 2 of Al-Haji's previous wives, women everyone thought were dead, came forward. They'd escaped years ago but had been too afraid to speak, too traumatized to come forward, convinced no one would believe them against a powerful man. But seeing Zainab's bravery gave them courage. With multiple testimonies, medical evidence, the journal, and Malik's documentation, the case became airtight. 6 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was packed. Media, activists, curious onlookers, and most importantly, survivors supporting each other. Al-Haji Musa arrived still playing his role, wearing his dramatic robes, carrying his staff, trying to intimidate witnesses with dark looks and whispered words about curses. But something had changed. The magic, real or imagined, seemed broken. Without his mirrors, without his compound, without his control, he was just an old man. The prosecution presented their case: the evidence of imprisonment, the forced marriage, the medical testimony about Zainab's condition when she was rescued, the journal entries from the missing women, the testimonies from the 2 previous wives who'd survived. It was overwhelming. But the most powerful moment came when Zainab took the stand. She'd spent months in therapy preparing for this. Months finding her voice again. When she finally sat in that witness box and faced her tormentor, she was no longer the terrified girl who'd been sold and trapped. She was a survivor, a warrior. She testified for 3 hours. She told everything. Auntie Raliat's abuse, the sale, the wedding, the imprisonment, the ritual room, the journal, the draining weakness she felt, the faces in the mirrors, the escape. Her voice never wavered. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. Guilty, on all counts. The judge sentenced Al-Haji Musa to 25 years in prison for forced marriage, unlawful imprisonment, domestic violence, and suspected involvement in the disappearances of 4 women. Police were launching a full investigation into those missing women, searching his compound for evidence, for remains. If they found what they suspected they'd find, more charges would come. Murder charges, life in prison. But even without that, at 53 years old, 25 years meant he'd likely die in prison. He'd never hurt anyone else again. But Zainab wasn't done. 3 months later, Auntie Raliat stood trial. The charges were severe: child abuse, child labor, human trafficking of a minor. The evidence was clear. Zainab testified again, this time about the 10 years of abuse. Medical experts confirmed the lasting damage: malnutrition, scarring from beatings, psychological trauma. The jury found Auntie Raliat guilty. The judge gave her 12 years for child trafficking and abuse. But perhaps the worst punishment was losing everything else. Her children cut ties with her completely. Her reputation in the community was destroyed. Her friends abandoned her. She lost her house, her savings spent on legal fees. She went to prison not just stripped of freedom, but stripped of everything: family, respect, dignity. Throughout the trial, through all the testimony and trauma and difficult months, Malik had been there. Not hovering, not demanding anything, just present. He'd sit in the courtroom gallery every day, offering silent support. He'd visit the shelter to check on Zainab's well-being, always respectful, always appropriate. He never asked for gratitude, never suggested she owed him anything. He'd simply say, "How are you today? What do you need? I'm here if you need anything." And slowly, very slowly, Zainab began to understand something. This was what kindness looked like. This was what respect looked like. This was what a good man looked like. She asked him once why he'd saved her. He told her the story. He was a mechanic who worked near the market where Al-Haji sometimes took Zainab. One day, he'd seen her stumbling under the weight of heavy bags while Al-Haji walked ahead, not helping. When she dropped something, the old man had raised his hand to strike her right there in public. Malik had intervened, offering to help carry the bags. Later that day, he'd asked around about them. Who was that girl? Who was that man? What he learned had made his blood boil. He'd lost his own sister years ago to an abusive marriage. He'd been too young then to help her, too powerless to save her. She'd died before he could intervene. When he saw Zainab, he saw his sister. He saw a chance to save someone this time. So he'd started watching, planning, preparing, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, he'd acted. Zainab listened to his story with tears streaming down her face. "You saved me to save your sister," she said. "You gave me freedom to give yourself peace." He nodded. "And it worked?" she asked. "Are you at peace now?" He smiled sadly. "More than I was," he said. "But your freedom isn't about my peace, Zainab. Your life is yours now. Whatever you do with it, wherever you go, whoever you become, that's your choice. I didn't save you so you'd owe me. I saved you because it was right, because you deserved to live." 3 years after her rescue, Zainab graduated from secondary school, top of her class. She'd been accepted to university to study social work, planning to formally help others the way she'd been helped. The day she got her acceptance letter, she was so excited she called Malik immediately. Over the 3 years, he'd become her closest friend. They talked almost every day. He'd supported her education, encouraged her dreams, celebrated her victories. But he'd never crossed a line, never pushed for more, never made her feel obligated or pressured. He'd simply been her friend, her brother, her safe person. That evening, they met for tea to celebrate. Zainab was glowing, talking excitedly about university, about her future, about all the people she'd help. Malik watched her with quiet joy, seeing how far she'd come from the broken girl he'd rescued. When she finally paused for breath, he said quietly that he had something to tell her. She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "Zainab," he said, "3 years ago, I saved you because it was right, because you deserved freedom. I never expected anything in return. But over these 3 years, watching you heal, watching you grow, watching you become this incredible, strong, brilliant woman, I fell in love with you." He held up his hand as she started to speak. "Please let me finish. I know your past. I know your trauma. I know you may never want marriage, may never trust a man that way again. And that's okay. Your friendship is enough. But I had to tell you the truth. I love you, Zainab. Not because I saved you, not because you owe me, but because of who you are. And if you don't feel the same, we'll never speak of this again. We'll stay friends. But I had to tell you. You deserve to know." Zainab sat there, frozen, her tea forgotten. 1,000 emotions crossed her face. Surprise, fear, confusion, and something else. Something she'd been feeling for months but had been too afraid to name. She'd been in therapy for 3 years, working through her trauma, learning to trust again, and somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, she'd started to heal, started to open her heart, started to feel something for this kind, patient, selfless man who'd never asked for anything. She'd been terrified to acknowledge it, convinced she was broken, that she'd never be able to love someone romantically without fear. But now, looking at Malik's honest, open face, she realized something. She wasn't that terrified 17-year-old girl anymore. She was a woman, a survivor, a person capable of making her own choices, and she chose him. Zainab reached across the table and took Malik's hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact with any man since her escape. "Malik," she said softly, 3 years ago, you gave me my life back. You taught me that good men exist, that kindness is real, that I was worth saving. You never pushed, never demanded, never made me feel like I owed you. You just loved me in the most patient, selfless way anyone could. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too." She smiled through her tears. "I want to marry you, Malik. Not because you saved me, not because I owe you, but because I choose you. Because you chose me when no one else did. Because I want to build a life with you. A real life. Built on love, not fear. On choice, not force. On partnership, not ownership. Will you marry me?" 6 months later, they married. But this wedding was different from Zainab's first one in every possible way. This ceremony was full of joy, of love, of community. Malik's family welcomed Zainab with open arms. And for the first time in her life since her parents died, Zainab felt like she belonged to a family again. As for Al-Haji Musa and Auntie Raliat, they're both in prison. Al-Haji will likely die there. Police did find evidence in his compound, remains of 2 of the 4 missing wives buried in the back. Murder charges were added. Life imprisonment without parole. The other 2 women's families finally got closure, even if it was tragic. Auntie Raliat serves her sentence in a different prison. Her children never visit. She's completely alone, experiencing the isolation and abandonment she inflicted on Zainab. Sometimes justice isn't just punishment. Sometimes it's poetic. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling us what you learned from this story.